All right. So, hi. Okay. So, normally we'd say, oh, this is Parsha Noach, and be all, but this is thoughts on Noach. Um, how does Noach, have we ever considered, does anything within Noah, the Parsha of Noach, does any of that relate to Ezekiel? Does any of it relate to the prince in Ezekiel, the people of the land in Ezekiel? Is there anything prophetic about what happens in Noah? So we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna talk about some relevances within the characters of Noah. I can say characters and story here because Francois is not here. But all right, so let's talk to our Elohim and we'll take a look at some ideas. Some blanks throughout here so you can scribble in your notes. But thank you, Father, for this opportunity to learn, to study, to find out what your plan is, and to help us to be prepared for that plan. We thank you for it. In the name of Yahushua, amen. All right, so we just finished the Feast and Festivals, and now here we are in 6 months of coasting and trying to figure out which way's up. So, thoughts on Noach. And to get an idea of where we're going, we have to have kind of a history of what's going on. So, of course, the children of Israel leave Egypt, and the evil generation dies off. The new generation takes over. They go through the process. They cross over, and before long, they're right into the idolatry of Canaan, and then they go into captivity under Nebuchadnezzar. But Nebuchadnezzar, he takes the cream of the crop, and he leaves all the riffraff and stuff behind, which these people settle along the border of Galilee, and they're known as the Samaritan people. Now, the Samaritans don't change. The Samaritans didn't change. From the captivity under Nebuchadnezzar, they stayed the same. When Alexander we'll round it up, from 335 to the end of that reign around 135 with the Civil War and the Maccabees and all that stuff, what we would call now the Yahudim, the people of Judea, have become Hellenized. The Samaritans stay the same. Okay? But the Jews become Hellenized, which sparks the Civil War. The Maccabees rise up and said, no, we're not going to be Greeks. The Jews that want to be Greeks say, yes, we're going to be Greeks. So they fight each other. A bunch of little yeshiva students get together and they go up against the strongest army of the time that's backing the Jews that want to be Hellenized. The result is the yeshiva students win the day, and they come up with a saying that we hear today. It was a saying that was reborn shortly after World War II, when it said, never again. Never again will we fall into this. So the scribes become the Pharisees, become the rabbis, and what's born out of that is 2 books, the Babylonian Talmud, well, actually the Jerusalem Talmud, and then the Babylonian Talmud. And the Babylonian Talmud often takes precedence over the Jerusalem Talmud. They're both basically the same. One has a few more extra things in it. But so the Samaritans become kind of an interesting group of people. They don't want to adhere to the things that the scribes and the Pharisees are saying, and they really don't want to worship what's becoming Judaism at the time, so they are rejected by the Jews. Okay? So the Jews won't have anything to do with them. They're considered dogs. And we know that dogs are what live outside the gates, right? So we have an interesting piece of something that occurs at John chapter 4, 20 through 25, where Yahushua ends up at a well. that a Samaritan woman is drawing water from, and he has a conversation with a Samaritan woman, unheard of. Not only will a Jew not have a conversation with a Samaritan, he will not have a conversation especially with a Samaritan woman. So let's go to John 4, 20 through 25, and consider something that happens. I'm going to back up a little bit because something hit me on the way here. He has 16. Yahushua says, "Go and call your husband to come here." The woman says, "I have no husband." Say, "I'm not married." Okay, and Yahushua says, "That's true. You have no husband, but you've had 5 husbands, and the one that you now have is not your husband." Okay, very important. Very important. The Samaritans have had 5 husbands, but the one that they have now is not their husband. Okay? There's 5 books of Torah. You've had 5 books of Torah, but what you worship right now is not what you should be worshiping. Your belief system right now is not what you should have. Okay? You've had 5 opportunities to get it right, but what you're doing now isn't what you should be after. Then she makes a comment. Let's go back to her comment. The woman said to him, "Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and you say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship." Okay? So they're worshiping in this mountain. Their fathers worshipped in this mountain. She says that Jacob dug this well, that Jacob drank from it, his children drank from it, their animals drank from it. Okay? Well, Jacob means to supplant, right? So they're drinking from something that was been supplanted. But you had 5 husbands. The one that you have now, that's been supplanted, is not your husband. But you worship on this mountain. What mountain are they worshiping on? They're worshiping on Mount Gerizim. Gerizim is where the blessings are given. I'm worshiping. I'm standing on blessings. But Yahushua says, no, you're not. Right? Okay. And then he makes this comment. He says, "Woman, believe me, the hour comes and you'll neither worship on this mountain nor in Jerusalem." Because the woman says, "We worship on this mountain. You say we need to worship in Jerusalem." Yahushua says, "No. The time's coming that it's not going to be your idea how to worship or the Jews' idea how to worship." Okay? Then he goes on to say, "You worship what you don't know." You're worshiping what you don't understand. You worship what you don't understand. Okay? We know what we worship. For salvation, for deliverance, for restoration is of the Yahudim. Okay? So does deliverance come from the Jews? Well, we have to look at this, and we'll understand this better once we look at Parsha Noach. Who are the Yahudim? Well, the Yahudim is nothing more than a name given to the Hebrew people that live in the land of Judea. Okay? Now we could equate this and say, oh, well, you know, Yahushua came from Judah and the deliverance comes from Yahushua, but that's not what he's talking about here. Okay? And this is not what we're considering here. We're considering that deliverance comes from the Yahudim, the Hebrews. Why? Okay, and we'll look at that. It's a very important little tidbit that we have to understand if we're going to understand what's going on in the book of Ezekiel, especially with the prince and the people of the land. Okay, deliverance comes from the Yahudim. The prince has to be composed of Yahudim to minister to the people of the land. All right? All right. And then he says, "But the hour comes, and now is, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The Father seeks such to worship. Elohim is spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth." Okay? Very important. Elohim as a word is a feminine plural. Yahuwah as a name is a feminine name. So for all the feminists, we can say, oh, God is a woman. But when we look at the female aspect within the Bible, it always points to something spiritual. And therefore, Yahuwah as Elohim is a spiritual entity. Okay? We are also spiritual entities, but in order for us to have free will, that spiritual aspect of us has to have a physical body so that we can make choices based on what should be and what shouldn't be in the world that we live in. Okay? All right, so not on this mountain or in Jerusalem. Your religion is irrelevant. Our religion is irrelevant. If you want to worship the Father, if you want to communicate with the Father, have a relationship with the Father, it has to be done in spirit, but it has to be done in truth. Where does the truth come from? Does the truth come from the Talmud? Does the truth come from Rashi? Or does it come from the Nasi, the Judah the Prince in the Talmud? Does it come from the Shulchan Aruch or the Mishnah or the Gemara or the Tosafot, who are the descendants of Rashi, or all the little things? Or does it come from the numerous doctrines that we've developed in Christianity throughout the years? Okay? The truth is that the truth can be found in neither one of those things. They might give us inklings of what's going on, but we'll never actually have the truth until we find it in the book. Okay? What is truth? Emet, right? Emet is the Aleph, the Mem, and the Tav. That if you're going to have truth, Emet, you have to have the Aleph, the beginning, the Mem, one of the two middle letters, and the Tav, the last letter. Okay? You have to have the beginning, the middle, and the end all have to line up to have truth. Okay? So this is very important in our consideration of Noah. So, Noah. We begin in Bereshit, or Genesis, chapter 6, 9 and 10. We're kind of getting an introduction to Noah. What's happened up to this point? Ish and Isha, who we will call Adam. Okay, remember, Adam doesn't become the name of the guy until the 4th chapter. Up until that time, it's Ish and Isha. They are the Adam. We are the Adam. Okay? Adam simply is a word that means humankind. But Ish and Isha are in the garden. They have the opportunity to learn, to prepare, so that they can do what they were created to do. Okay? Modern theology, ancient theology, theology in general, states that Bereshit chapter 1 and Bereshit chapter 2 are the same event. One is a generalized event, the other one is a specific event. But we have to consider that if we're going to understand what the Torah is telling us, if we're going to understand the importance of the children of Israel, then we have to understand that Bereshit chapter 1, that is basically called the book of E, okay, because it's Elohim. The name Yahuwah doesn't occur anywhere in there. Second chapter comes from what they call the book of, for some reason, the book of J, even though there's no J in Hebrew. Okay, but the first book is the creation of humankind, the creation of the people of the land specifically. Okay, you have to have someone to teach. The second chapter is the creation of the Adam who's placed in Eden in order to be taught so that he can minister effectively to the people of the land. What are the people in chapter 1 responsible for doing? They have to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Okay? I'm going to develop humankind, and then I'm going to create teachers and ministers to give to them, to teach them how to relate to me. Okay, it's the first time we read about it, but if we read about it, the second chapter is just telling us how the first chapter was done, then we kind of lose perspective of what's going on. So Ish and Isha drop the ball. They eat from the tree they're not supposed to eat from, and they're rejected from the garden. The plan is kind of stifled. Cain kills Abel. Okay? In other words, the desire to have things kills out the spirit. So Seth comes along as a replacement. Seth sets out to teach, but Seth eventually is sucked in to the whole thing. Enoch comes along. Enoch goes out with the same mission, but eventually the people don't listen to Enoch, to where we come to the time of Enosh, where we're told in the Torah that it was here that people began to call upon the name of Yahuwah. But what we have there is we have a word, a halal, that says they began to call on the name of Yahuwah. They began to profane the name of Yahuwah. They began to ignore the name of Yahuwah. Okay? Methuselah is the last stand. Methuselah, we don't read a lot about Methuselah because basically Methuselah had absolutely zero effect. The world has become totally corrupted. Okay? So, Elohim makes a way. And he finds a person by the name of Noah, and we read about that starting in Bereshit 6, verse 9. It says, "These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man and perfect in his generations. And Noah walked with Elohim." Okay, so he was upright and perfect in his generation. Okay, now, was he upright and perfect in the generation of his family? Or was he upright and perfect in what we consider the corrupt world? If he was upright and perfect in what we would consider the corrupt world, then he probably wasn't all that in a bag of potato chips. Meyer Lansky was a criminal that killed people, but was very respected for what he did. Okay? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Meyer Lansky was a Jewish mobster that hung out with Lucky Luciano and all those people, was the one that finally had to cast the last vote to kill Bugsy Siegel and all that. So, I mean, if you know your mafia stuff, then there we go. But anyway.
I don't think so.
So he couldn't have been perfect and upright in the world that he lived in. Mm-hmm. So we have to consider that he was perfect and upright in the generations that he had come from. Okay? So he was, you had Seth, you had Enoch, you had Methuselah, and now you have Noah. Noah is the absolute last chance for the people of the land to come together.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. But what happens? He spends 100 years building a giant boat out in the middle of nowhere. And everybody thinks he's a nutcase. Okay? So, he was a man righteous and wholehearted. Okay? Basically, the word for righteous now. Okay? Let's consider Noah means rest. Okay? Noah means rest. The word for righteous here is
righteous.
I spelled it wrong. Zedek.
Zedek.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, Zedek means righteous one. Okay. We have Zedekim. You know, we look at the stories in Talmuds and other different Jewish folklore. There are, I think, 36 Zedekim living in the world at any given time. And if they were all to disappear off the face of the earth, then the earth would be destroyed. Because we cannot survive without righteous people. They don't know who they are. If they ever discover who they are, they cease to be Zedekim. That's the folklore behind it. But something to consider about righteousness is that it starts with the letter Zadi. As a word, Zadi means a trap, a snare. Can righteousness become a snare? Can righteousness become a trap? When it does that, it becomes self-righteousness. Okay? So he was a person who was a Zadok in his generation. Because he was in existence, the world had a chance to be delivered. But he was also Tamayim. He was also perfect, wholehearted. He was complete. Which makes it a very important thing, because that's what we're seeking to become, is complete. In a conversation last night, I asked a question, is what was the major role of Yahusha? And you get the basic religious responses. Came to deliver us. He came to redeem us, deliver us, and restore us. He came in the image of the Father, and the role of Yahusha was to set the example of what a righteous and whole person should be, without any snares. Something that we are capable of being, because we are all descendants of the Adam of the second chapter. We're not descendants of the people of the land, okay? Because that first group of folks was wiped out, okay? So we should be able to do the things that Yahusha did. But we can't do the things that Yahusha did because we don't recognize that the Father is within us and we are within the Father. We are within the Father and the Father is within us. We can say that we do all we want, but there's always an inkling of doubt that says, I don't know. Because we spend too much time believing that Elohim exists as opposed to understanding that Elohim is present. Once we get to the point where we start to understand that presence and believe that and feel that, then the paradigm begins to change. Okay? So the rest of Elohim can be found in righteousness, but the rest of Elohim can also become a trap for us. It becomes a trap for us when we begin to stray towards one side or stray towards the other side, because our belief system is drawn away from what it should be. Okay? And we'll find out about that in a minute. Then we have verse 10 that's very important for us to understand, especially the order in which it's given. And Noah brought forth or begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay? So what is the relevance of Shem, Ham, and Japheth? Shem is going to be the father of the Hebrew people. Shem will bring forth the way. Shem will bring forth the children of Israel, and through Shem will come the prince in Ezekiel. Okay? Let's skip Ham for a minute. Japheth. Japheth as a word means to expand, expansion. Japheth becomes the people of the land. Japheth will fill the world. He will be fruitful, he will multiply. He will become the people of Europe. He will become the people of the United States. He will become the people around the world. Now, Ham, in the middle of the two, his descendants go east to Shinar, and they settle in the east, and they build a tower, and they build a city called Babylon, and they begin something called idolatry. Okay? He's in the middle here for a reason. Because Ham affects both Shem, and he's going to affect Japheth as well. Okay? So let's keep that in consideration. All right. So why do we need Ham?
Because it tastes good.
There we go. Mayonnaise, mayonnaise, mayonnaise goes good on a no. All right. Why do we need, if we have Shem who can minister effectively to Japheth, we'll read about that in just a second, why do we need something that brings forth idolatry in the middle? Okay.
Is this something to work back to?
Okay, let's keep that in mind for a second. Let's find out why we needed Ham in the first place. And we go to Bereshit 6:11, and it says, "And the earth also was corrupt before Elohim, and the earth was filled with violence. And Elohim looked at the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all the flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And Elohim said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth." Okay? So, Elohim says, it's filled with corruption and violence. There is absolutely no reverence of me. There's actually no knowledge of me in the earth. What has happened is it's become totally lopsided to one side. It becomes totally lopsided to violence and corruption. Do I have free will? I can have no more free will in a totally corrupt society than I can in a perfect society. I cannot make choices for myself. Communism is I'm not picking on communism, but I'm just going to say, communism, socialism becomes so corrupted in that only the government can speak. And the name of the guys went right out of my head, but we remember a novel called 1984.
Orwell.
Yeah, Orwell.
Big Brother.
Okay, Big Brother. I can't think. He was afraid. He had a notebook, a blank notebook in his desk. He was afraid to pull it out because the cameras might see that he had a blank notebook and he could actually express his own thoughts. Totally corrupt society negates free will. Just as much as a perfect society would negate free will. If it's a perfect society, then I don't have to make a choice because I know exactly what I'm supposed to do and I do exactly what I'm supposed to do. I don't think about going contrary to it. Okay? So we need to have a catalyst. He's going to destroy a completely corrupted system because Seth didn't have an effect, Enoch didn't have an effect, Methuselah didn't have an effect, Noah didn't have an effect. So he has to create a means for there to be an effective world. Okay? So, turn the page. Turn the page.
Okay. Do it.
All right. Oh, look at there. It was right there. So, 14 says, make an ark of, now it says gopher wood, but if we look at the Hebrew here, actually in the Hebrew it does say gopher wood as well, but it's also thought that it might have been something related to shittim wood, but that's just speculation. Nobody knows exactly what gopher wood is, but that's not relevant right now.
Okay.
You shall make an ark, and you pitch it within and pitch it without. And it goes on to tell us that the ark was to have 3 levels, the lower level, the middle level, and the upper level where there was a window. Okay? Now, if we look at the word for ark, is tavia, that also means word. So the word has 3 levels. It has a lower level, a middle level, and an upper level. And those levels are said to be knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Okay? Just to have knowledge does not make me wise. If I have knowledge, I don't necessarily know how to, I can have all the knowledge in the world and still be a total and complete fool. Okay? I won't say idiot because of the camera. Oops. Wisdom is the next level. I can have all the wisdom in the world, but if I don't actually apply that wisdom myself, then I have no understanding. Okay? I have to have both knowledge and wisdom before I can reach the 3rd level, which is understanding. I know how to apply it, and I understand what the effect is supposed to be. And in that case, I'm in the presence of the light that comes through the window, the breath of fresh air, the light, Okay? So, verse 3 of chapter 7, actually, is an interesting verse. Okay? It's an interesting verse because if we go back to Bereshit chapter 2, wherever that was, says, and these are the generations of the heavens and the earth, that's 4. In the day they were created, and the day that Yahweh Elohim made the earth and the heavens. And every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, Elohim had not caused rain to come upon the earth. There was no man to till the ground. And there came up a mist from the earth and watered the ground. Okay? There had not been a major disruption. Okay? But what happens now? And the waters returned from off the earth continually. And I think I put the wrong one there. The one that I meant to put down there, and see if I can find it. This is the one that he said that he opened up the well springs. Basically, water gushed up from the earth. It started to rain. All of the water was thrown at the earth. So final last ditch attempt. I'm going to throw all the water at the earth. I'm going to throw all of what I have to offer at the earth. And it was still rejected, and they drowned in it. It was still rejected, and they drowned in it. And it stayed there. And the waters returned off the earth continually, and after the end of 150 days, the waters decreased. And we'll go to that one in just a second. And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat. Okay? Now it says, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Why is that relevant that we understand 40 days and 40 nights? Okay? We're still looking at who we are now. And we'll go back to Ham, Japheth, or Shem, Ham, and Japheth in a minute. 40 days. Yom. Yom is the name given to what? Light. Right? And then Layla, night, is the name given to what? Darkness. Okay? So 40 days of light. Okay? 40 is a numerical value that represents what?
That's transition.
Transition. Okay? So within the ark, if you take all the levels of the ark, there has to come a transition of your being able to perceive light. Can I truly perceive all the good things? Can I truly perceive all the righteous things? Or do they become a snare to me? Okay? Then I have to be able to perceive Layla. I have to be able to perceive the darkness. Just because it's dark doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Just because I'm going under tribulation doesn't necessarily mean that the world is ending. I have to be able to understand what good things are, and I have to understand what bad things are. I have to know the difference between good and bad, and I have to know the difference, not good and bad, okay? I have to know the difference between good and the absence of good, because technically there is no evil. There's either good or there's the absence of good. There's either light or the absence of light, right? All right, so we have a special consideration of Bereshit 7, 22 through 23. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on the same were the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the waters and the windows of heaven were open. Okay, that's the one I was looking for earlier. Okay, the 600th year of Noah's life. 600. All right, so 600. We have additional letters in the Aleph Beit. Okay, we have. Let me see. Aleph Beit Gimel Dalet Hey Vav Zayin Het Tet Yod. Okay, we have Kaf. We have final form of Mem. We have the final form of Nun. We have the final form of Sadi. Okay? 500, 600, 700, 800, I'm missing one, sorry. Anyway, the point is 600. The 600th year of Noah's life, the waters were open, okay? What would this have to do with the Mem in the second month? The second month. Okay. What is the second month?
The second Passover.
Huh? Well, the second Passover. What happens in the second month? Ready? The first month is the Passover. The Passover and the second month, at the end of the second month, what happens? No, that's not even true. Basically, nothing happens in the second month.
No, I know, except for the second
So we're all right.
Well, no, the second
Yeah.
Well
Passover
done,
does happen in the second month.
What happened?
What is the relevance of the second month?
There's this, the destruction, the flood.
The letter baked.
Baked.
Baked means what?
House.
The tent.
House, tabernacle.
The tent.
Okay.
Oh,
Month is what?
what's Yom?
Kodesh.
Oh, Kodesh.
Kodesh, that comes from the root chadash. That means to restore.
For the temple's built.
So it's a restoration of what?
Oh, the house.
Restoration of house is
That's-
going to come through the rest that's found within the word of Elohim.
Oh.
Okay? And that same day were all of the flood waters opened up. That if rest was going to be found within the word of Elohim, the tabernacle of Elohim had to be open for people to respond to it. All the water comes out,
Oh,
but the people reject it.
wow,
And what happens? They drowned in the very thing that could save them.
wow.
Okay? What
So they had a
happened?
choice?
Huh?
You're saying they had a choice?
They had a choice. But what happens when pure water, fresh water, if I take a bottle of whatever water du jour is out of the thing, okay, and I pour it onto the dirt, what happens? It gets cloudy. I can take that and I can take the dirt and I can pour it into my water. What happens to my water? It gets cloudy. I no longer see it. What happened to the word? It got totally cloudy, got muddied. People were no longer able to respond to it.
Huh.
They did not want to enter into the ark. They didn't want to enter into the word. They didn't want to climb the levels. Why? Because they'd gotten complacent. And they'd gotten so complacent to the point that Elohim not only failed to exist, but he failed to be acknowledged as being present. Okay?
It's coming.
So then all in whose nostrils was the Ruach died. Existence, Elohim withdrew his spirit, and when Elohim withdraws, when the power withdraws, when the force of life withdraws, what happens to us? We die. Okay? And that's, that's biophysics too. You know, we require electricity for our lives to function. That electricity comes from the sun, that somehow or another we must have some kind of solar cells, biological solar cells, that make our hearts beat, that make electrical impulses send a thought from one end of our brain to the other end of our brain to say, hey, breathe. Okay? But when that electrical impulse leaves, when the very power that makes that thing work leave, well, these earth suits cease to function. Right? Why does the spirit leave? Because we refuse to have a relationship with our Elohim. You know, it's not a religious idea. It's a life idea. A relationship with Elohim, is not a religious concept. It's an everyday concept. If I say that Yahuwah Elohim, if I have a relationship with Yahuwah Elohim, in Yahuwah, in every aspect of my life, at every moment that I exist, I am aware of Elohim, the mighty force in my life that has the authority to redeem me, deliver me, restore me, heal me, bring me rest, but also to judge me based on my faith only. Because Revelation tells us that he opened the book and he looked and what works were there. What you've actually done with your life is what you were judged on. I can have all the faith in the world, but if I don't take any action with it, then it's useless. Okay? You know, faith without works is dead. Belief without action is ineffective. All right. So, and he blotted out every substance which was upon the face of the earth, both man, cattle, creeping things, fowl, blah, 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 blah. All right. So he changed the paradigm completely. Now you have a boat floating around in a watery world with 8 people living on board and a whole bunch of animals. Okay? So let's go to Bereshit 7:24. That says, and the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. What is 150 days? What is 150? What is the numerical, what letter has a numerical value of 100? Kof. What has a numerical value of 50? Nun.
None.
Nun. Okay, so what is the relevance of the waters winning? The waters won. They prevailed. They were victorious at the end of 150 days.
Wow.
When the waters become victorious in our lives, when we are willing to kof, the root of the word kodesh, when we are willing to set apart something specifically, when we are willing to set apart our life, our very soul, our very existence, towards living according to the water. Okay?
Yes.
Now, what we've learned so far, recap. There was hope in the multitude of generations. Seth, Enoch, Methuselah, and Noah. 4 generations. Okay? Ministering to, what is the 4th generation? 3rd and the 4th generations of them that hate me. Trying to minister to the 3rd and the 4th generations of those that hate him. They were ineffective. The waters came, and even the waters being poured out were ineffective. Life was lost regardless. No one wanted to enter into the ark to figure it out. Why do you believe what you believe? What is the origin of your belief? Is your belief going to lead you to the promised land, or is your belief going to leave you outside the gates? Why do you believe what you believe? Okay? That takes us to the relevance of Shem, Ham, and Japheth in Bereshit 9, 21 and 27. Juice.
Yay!
All right. So, what's happened? They've gotten off the ark, they've settled down, and Noah decides he wants to have a vineyard. And he plants grapes. And it's great. You squeeze the grapes, you make harmless grape juice, and you drink harmless grape juice. Now, what happens when you leave harmless grape juice with its sugary content out in the sun for 3 or 4 or 5 days?
Why?
Yeah, candy is dandy, but liquor is quicker. Okay, now, you can take, it becomes wine. Now you can take wine, and I learned about this when I was in Spain. My cousin, the one that passed away, had a bottle of something that was called Licor de Tinto. Now, Tinto is a red wine. It's a very strong, potent, not really sweet wine, but you can taste the sweet afterthoughts. Okay, and in Spain, everything is stored in casks, wooden casks, before it's allowed to do its thing. But when you reduce tinto down even more, it becomes a liqueur and it becomes extremely strong. Okay? Now, if you take grape juice and let it sit out in the sun, it becomes alcohol. But if you let it sit out in the sun even longer, it becomes very, very strong alcohol. And the same thing with, we read in the Bible about wine and strong drink. Okay? The word for strong drink in the Bible is heket, which is not a Hebrew word, it's an Egyptian word. Heket was what's it called? The monster drink of ancient Egypt. Okay, it was the power, or whatever, the energy drink. And what it was composed of was grain, probably barley around there, because barley is prevalent in that area. Barley with dates and raisins and honey. And if you eat this right away, well, it's an energy boost, and you could, as a slave, you could eat this and you could go out and do your slave things with a lot more effectiveness. But what happens when you allow a concoction of barley with honey, with water mixed in to make it palatable, and raisins and dates in it? What happens when that sits out in the sun for 3 or 4 or 5 days because there's no refrigeration?
You have a good pain reliever at the end of the day.
It becomes something that in modern terms we like to call moonshine. Okay? So Noah plants a vineyard. And he starts to drink his own product to the point where he becomes drunk. And he ends up naked inside of his tent. Okay? Now, we have to go to the Talmud to get an idea of what happens. Canaan, which is Ham's son, does something to violate Noah. Some kind of perversion is what the Talmud states. Okay? So, what happens after that? Let's go to 9:21. And he drank of the wine and was drunk, and he was uncovered within his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his 2 brethren without. It's a huge statement in that. Okay? First of all, who was Canaan? Canaan was the son of Ham, but Canaan violated the land contract. Canaan inhabited land that belonged to Shem. Now Shem didn't do anything about it. But as a result, Canaan was cursed because he had inhabited land he was not supposed to inhabit. The result of that curse was that Canaan slipped into something that would be called idolatry, that would probably come from his father down the road. Okay? But what's huge about this statement is that Ham, where is he? Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and he told his 2 brethren outside. So,
Everywhere.
okay,
Yes.
the promise that would
Hallelujah.
come through Abraham would affect the people of the land, the whole world. But there had to be a means by which that effect would take place. That effect would take place by and through the descendants of Shem. Okay? The descendants of Shem, who was a descendant of Noah, who was a descendant of Methuselah, of Enoch, and of Seth, would now be tasked with ministering to the people of the land. That was the task that was given to Adam in the first place. Okay? So this is where, when we read in Exodus 19, if you will listen to my voice and you will guard my covenant, you will be my special treasure. I will set you apart to the specific purpose of becoming ministers to the world. Okay? So the children of Shem would have that responsibility. Shem would bring forth Eber. Eber is the root of the word Ibrit, which means Hebrews. Okay? But here we read that Ham goes and talks to Shem. And he talks to Japheth. Okay? Idolatry is going to affect both the descendants of Shem, and it's going to affect the descendants of Japheth.
Huh.
Okay?
Right.
What happens when idolatry affects the descendants of Shem? The kingdom splits. Okay? Now, let's go on. And Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon their shoulders and went backwards and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were backwards, and they did not see their father's nakedness. Okay. What does Noah mean?
Rest.
Rest. Rest is found within the tent. Rest is found within the tabernacle. But if I go, now, we look at this from a topical point of view, what do we see? Two sons that are doing the right thing. They don't want to see their father's nakedness, so they put this blanket on, they walk in there backwards, step over the broken wine casks and stuff, and lay it down on him, and then they go out. They don't look back to see if they cover the right spots. Okay? It says they went backwards, they covered him up, they didn't look at him. What is Noah being completely bare within the tabernacle? What does that represent for us? Anybody?
Sin.
Truth. This is the pure rest that is found only in the tabernacle.
Yeah.
Okay? But what do?
They
They
cover it up.
go backwards. They don't look
They
at the
don't
truth.
look at the truth.
Japheth and Shem, they go backwards. They don't look at the truth. They are not aware of what the rest is of Elohim. They cover it up. They never bother to look at the rest, and they leave. Why? Why? Because Ham went and spoke to both of them.
Yes. Ooh,
Okay.
Never
So,
heard that perspective.
so Ham has spoken to both of
Awesome.
them. What happens now? What happens now? Let's find out.
Confusion.
And Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done to him. Had Ham done anything to him? No. He's saying he knew what his younger son, he knew what Ham's younger son had done. He knew the perversion that Canaan was going to commit that would pervert the rest of Elohim.
Wow.
Now what happens?
So he saw that prophetically.
Prophetically.
Yeah.
This is a prophetic.
It was a vision.
This is a
an
prophetic
insight.
statement that's preparing us for the book of Ezekiel.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay? Because now you go and you read the book of Ezekiel, especially the part about the prince ministering to the people of the land, you find that restoration has to take place to Shem in order for him to minister effectively to Japheth to remove the curse of Ham and Canaan.
Wow.
That's what happens in Ezekiel. This is why we have sacrifices that are offered for a 6-month period from Passover through Sukkot, skipping Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur. They no longer exist. Shavuot is no longer there. Okay? You have Passover all the way to Sukkot. Okay? Because you don't need those other three. Torah's been given. The Ruach's been given. You either get it or you don't get it. You don't have to self-reflect anymore because now you're inside the gate. Now you need is someone to minister to you. And here comes the prince. The northern kingdom, the southern kingdom have been reunited. Now they're going to take on their roles, in Genesis and Shemot 19, and now they're going to minister to the people of the land. They're going to do what they were created to do.
Wow.
Okay? But let's go on. Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. Wow. So Canaan, the curse and idolatry is going to serve his brothers. Does that make any sense? We have a word, which is Ebed, and Ebed. All right, Ebed. Abed, no, Ebed. Means servant, but it also means to put into bondage. So, Canaan is not going to serve his brothers. Canaan is going to put his brothers into bondage. How is he going to put them into bondage? By introducing them to idolatry. What happens when we get introduced to idolatry? Eventually it becomes part of our belief system. And when we recognize it as part of our belief system 1,000 or 2,000 years down the road, we don't want to get rid of it because we're comfortable in our belief system. That's why I say sometimes it's easier to dig up a redwood tree with a tablespoon or with a pecan tree with a tablespoon. The pecan tree has a root that's just as deep as the tree is tall with a tablespoon. Okay? So let's go on because it gets better. And he said, "Blessed be Yahuwah, the Elohim of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant." Okay? So, Canaan will be his servant. Shem will do what? They will enter into the promised land to displace Cain. One particular group of people in Canaan will come to Joshua and trick Joshua and become his woodcutters and his water. Okay? But what will happen to the balance of it? They're not going to do what they're told to do. What was the commandment that Elohim gave to the children of Israel when they went into Canaan?
Don't make a covenant with other people.
Kill it all, don't make a covenant with anything. So they didn't kill it all, and they began to make covenants. The result was that Canaan didn't serve Shem. Canaan would put Shem into bondage, and then the result would be that the kingdom would split. Okay?
Wow.
Elohim shall enlarge Japheth. First of all, Japheth means to expand. Japheth has to expand. Japheth has to be enlarged. There has to be a people of the land. They must be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The first commandment given to humankind has to be fulfilled. Okay? And shall dwell in the tents of Shem. Japheth will dwell in the tents of Shem. If Shem becomes the prince, and Japheth is the people of the land, will Japheth dwell in the tents of Shem? Of course they will.
That's cool.
Because they'll be ministered to by Shem. But in the process of doing this, Canaan shall be his servant. Canaan will be the servant of Japheth as well. So not only will Canaan corrupt Shem, but Canaan will also corrupt Japheth. So what happens? We have the Roman Empire, which is a great... Europe came from the Roman Empire, basically.
Yeah.
And we have what? We have the pantheon of deities of the Roman Empire that came from the pantheon of deities of the Greek Empire. And we have now a mixture of Judaism and Greco-Roman mythology that is jammed together to satisfy an emperor who needed a political system to become powerful. That emperor was Constantine, who created something.
Yeah.
Okay? And Shem was pushed aside, Japheth was pushed aside, and you worship what you don't know came in the middle, affecting both Shem and Japheth.
Wow.
So now you have Judaism, which is not Torah observance. You have Christianity, which is not Torah observance. And you have a road in the middle that Yahushua says is very narrow and very few are those that find it. Why? Because Judaism, and I'll use say Elohim as an example, I can pick on them. They are very, very fond of celebrating their feasts and their festivals. In fact, one particular lady, very sweet lady, got very upset when we didn't celebrate Rosh Hashanah. Because I told them we need to observe Yom Teruah. We started to get rid of the feasts and festivals from the Talmudic point of view. It was a very, very difficult pill to swallow. So, and because people want the fun in things, what are we doing for Purim? Purim, really? You want to celebrate Purim? I mean, great, dress up, have hamantashen, make noise when you read the book of Esther. Great. That's Talmud. It has nothing to do with Torah. What are you doing for Hanukkah? Well, I'm going to have a Hanukkah tree, and I'm going to put a mesh on the bench, and I'm going to have a, the guy can put the elf on the shelf, right? No, I'm just saying. Why? Because I want the fun in it. But I lose the relevance of what's on that narrow path.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with either one until I start to mix it in with what the Torah has to say. I say, I've mentioned this
Making it
about
what it's not.
I've mentioned this about Christmas. You want to have a tree and you want to have Santa Claus, you want to have elves, knock yourself out. But don't bring anything that has to do with the Torah into it, because then you violate Devarim that says, don't take what the Canaanites are doing and corrupt the Torah with it. So,
That's right.
anyway,
That's right.
what we're reading here, though, is that Ham, being in the center, corrupts Shem and he corrupts Japheth. And it is until Shem is completely put back together that they can once again move forward to being the minister of the land. What happens if they fail to come together?
Come again.
Then what is eventually going to happen will happen again.
Yeah.
What happened when Seth and Enoch and Methuselah and Noah failed?
Yeah.
The world got to a point where it was so corrupt that it was destroyed. We have to have a catalyst. We have to have Ham in the middle. Because without Ham in the middle, we have no free will. We have no ability to choose between what is light and what is darkness. We have no ability to decide whether or not we want to have a real relationship with Elohim. So we have to have Ham. We have to have the catalyst. Just like they had to have the catalyst that started the whole thing in the first place. But how do you put a fire out? You have 3 different types of fire extinguishers. You can't use one type of fire extinguisher on a certain kind of fire.
Right.
You can't spray an electrical fire with water. So you have to make sure that you use the right kind of fire extinguisher. What fire extinguisher do we have? What fire extinguisher do we have to make sure that the fire doesn't burn out of control? And Noah lived after the flood 350 years. Or 350 years. 350 years. Noah lived after the flood 350 years. What is the relevance of 350?
350.
What is the numerical value? What letter has a numerical value of 300? You're right. Shin.
Shin.
And 50. What is Shin? What is the relevance of 350 years? This is what tells us the difference in how to perceive the catalyst correctly. Shin has 2 sides. Remember, it has the front side, which is Elohim's point of view, based on his word. The backside of Shin is our point of view, based on the enticements of the Satan. Okay? Based on our flesh, based on our desire and our emotion. We get a good example of the 2 sides of Shin in one of the events in the Gospels where Yahusha and the apostles are coming, or the disciples, or the Talmudim, or whatever you want to call them, are coming into Jerusalem, and Yahusha tells them, all right, fellas, here's what's going to happen. We're going to come here, we're going to have a nice Passover, and then I'm going to get arrested, they're going to beat me up, and they're going to kill me. And Peter says, dude, don't freak out, and stress out. That's not going to happen to you. You're going to be fine. And Yahusha says, what? Get behind me, Satan. And he says, Peter, you cannot look at things from your point of view. You have to see them from Elohim's point of view. This is a very Hebraic idiom. What he's saying is, Peter, turn your shin around. Stop looking at things from your point of view. You have to be able to look at things from Elohim's point of view. You cannot allow your emotions to dictate what Elohim has planned. Okay? So, when we consider the catalyst, in the end, we will have the same choice that the people of the land had prior to the flood. Do we want to look at it from our point of view or Elohim's point of view? Because that is ultimately what's going to affect the final product, which is life.
Mm-hmm.
Our very soul's dependence, the existence of our very soul is dependent on our choice in Shin, whether we allow Ham to disrupt us, whether we are Shem or Japheth, is up to only your pastor or your minister or the televangelist or the best-selling author or me. I'm the only one that can dictate, right? That would make me a cult leader. No. You are the only one that can dictate the future and condition of your soul. And you are the only one that can dictate the future condition of your life. The Spirit of Elohim dwells within you. You don't want it to be pulled away from you.
No.
Okay? And that is what becomes the extreme relevance of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and whether or not we are willing to look upon the rest that's within the tabernacle in its fully exposed state, or if we're going to buy into what Ham tells us and cover our eyes so that we don't see it, and we cover it up with our own perspective, whether we take the fig leaves and cover up our own nakedness. And so, there we have Parsha Noach for this year, or
Wow.
thoughts on Noach for this year.
Wow.
Any questions?
Rich.
Looking at the question section.
Yeah, no, that's good.
All
So,
right.
I have a question.
What group? Yes.
So, no, grooviness hasn't been achieved yet. So, Ham himself actually didn't do anything wrong. It was his descendants that brought in the idolatry that
Well,
did wrong.
Canaan is the one that settled in the land he wasn't supposed to. That's the first part. So
Okay.
Canaan brought a curse upon himself. Ham, however, the descendants of Ham settled in the valley of Shinar, and it was the descendants of Ham that built the Tower of Babel with the sole purpose of replacing Elohim with their own Elohim. So both of them were in the wrong. But the incident with Noah, we have to understand that it was Canaan specifically that violated Noah, not Ham. That's why he said to his youngest son, well, Ham wasn't his youngest son, but Canaan was the youngest son of Ham.
Okay. I think I understand it.
Okay. All right. So now, grooviness has been achieved. All righty.